Um, okay, so we are recording. Oh no. Oh, and transcription has started. So you can see transcriptions too if you want. Um, Welcome everybody. We're so happy to see you on this beautiful Friday morning. It is beautiful in Montpelier at least. It is sunny and above freezing, and that's the most I can expect or ask for. My name is Jennifer Johnson. I'm the Library Advancement Assistant at the Vermont Department of Libraries. I also manage our social media accounts, and I'm a member of the communications team. And I have a really strong interest in library social media stuff. So I'm hoping that this sort of social media roundup format, where we can talk about different topics every once in a while, um, will be something we can continue moving forward. So maybe next time we talk about Instagram or something like that. But we noticed there was a pretty um, big interest in social media policies, so we wanted to spend the most time on that today. But I'll let my colleague Karen introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. As Jennifer mentioned, my name is Karen Gravlin. I am the library consultant for inclusive services and also the director of the ABLE Library. And in a prior position, I served on a social media committee for my library system. So I do have some experience with posting on social media and some of the kind of tricky things that can arise when you're using social media as a library. Um, and and it's beautiful here. I'm in Bradford. It's 39 degrees and nice and sunny. So um, it's a nice February day here. And Jennifer, do you want to go ahead and share the?
I am going to share my PowerPoint for today. Let's get it on this from beginning. So I hope everyone knows they're in the social media roundup session. That's what we called it this time. Maybe we'll call it something different next time, but we left it pretty generic so that we can have maybe another session of this with different topics. So I'll do a quick run through of the agenda today. We're going to start with social media policies because that's going to be the biggest chunk of today's webinar. We're going to basically start with why they're important, why you should have one. We'll talk about the components of policies. We really leaned on the social media guidelines for public and academic libraries from the American Library Association. That was an article that was linked in the preview email I sent yesterday. So I recommend reading that thoroughly several times, but we're going to discuss some of the bare bones things they talk about today. And throughout this social media policy segment, we'll be featuring some examples from libraries. Sam Maskell, who is here from Rockingham Free Public Library in Bellows Falls, kindly sent their social networking policy. So we'll invite her a little bit later to just say a few words about, why they made their policy and how they've been using it. VLA, Vermont Library Association, sent their social media policy for us to look at. And then we'll be looking at the VTLib social media policy a little bit. So full disclosure, we actually need to update ours. So we're going to highlight the importance of taking a look at your policy, every once in a while and updating it and making sure it's current. So that's why I didn't send it out beforehand. But once we update it, it will be readily available for everyone to look at. Our second little segment will be about accessibility on social media. And then the last segment will be super quick about some cool things you can do on Facebook now. And especially since Facebook and Instagram have kind of merged together to become Meta. You might have seen some articles about that. I guess if you could keep the cameras off and be muted throughout the whole thing until the end. We're not sure how much time we're going to have for questions, so please put anything that comes up into the chat, and we'll either address it at the end, but if we can't, we will get back to you via email. So just keep putting those questions in the chat, and we will try to get to them whenever we can. All right, I think we're ready to get started. So Karen, you're going to talk about why social media policies are important.
So the first question is, why have a social media policy in the first place? And the answer to that is that, as with all policies, a social media policy sets expectations clearly for both staff and patrons. It really helps you take the guesswork out of a situation when you have a policy in place. And it lets staff know what they should be doing on social media, and then it also lets patrons know what to expect on your social media. And even if your patrons don't read your social media policy, which they probably won't, when they see a post that they don't like and bring it to your attention, you can refer back to your social media policy to illustrate why that particular post was created, or why you left another patron's comment up, even though you may not agree with what that patron was saying. The other point is that social media policies also help to create community guidelines. So remember that your social media is an extension of your physical library space. So if patrons don't feel safe or welcome on your Facebook page, they may feel that it would be a similar experience for them if they walked into your building. And then by the same token, if you're constantly removing comments that patrons have made on your social media and it's not clear why, they can feel like their opinions don't matter to you, and kind of disengage from the library because they feel like, it's not a community space. And then another benefit to having a social media policy is that it allows you to think things through before there's an issue. So, what will you consider unacceptable behavior on your social media platforms, and what are the consequences for that unacceptable behavior? And then on a more positive side, it also prompts you to think about why your library is on social media in the first place. And it can kind of help you drill down to what you want to accomplish by engaging in social media. Unfortunately, one of the trickier aspects of social media for libraries is that libraries, and by extension, their social media, may be considered designated public forums. And to my knowledge, cases regarding library social media as designated public forums are still pending in courts, and there hasn't been a definitive ruling from the Supreme Court at this point. But it may be good practice to assume that your social media is a designated public forum. So a couple of notes on this, and you'll see on the slide. Municipal libraries may be subject to the social media policy of your town or city. So check your town's policies before you start creating your own, just to make sure that you're in compliance with them. And then our other note is that Jennifer and I are not lawyers. I know you're all shocked. ALA and VTLib both recommend that you consult legal counsel about any policies instituted in the library, but especially when it comes to this, because there are First Amendment issues involved with social media. But before we go any further, I wanted to invite Sam from Rockingham Free Public Library, who shared her social media, to kind of talk with us a little bit about the process and why you created one in the first place and how you're using it, if you don't mind.
Sure, I would be happy to talk. So I am Sam Maskell. I'm the Youth Services Librarian at the Rockingham Free Public Library. And back in 2011, with a lot of research and assistance from staff and my director, I also wrote our social media policy, which is why if you look at it now, it's a little archaic, the language is a little old. Teens aren't flocking to Blogger anymore. But we created it because there was an incident. Fortunately, it was not a library incident. It happened at Town Hall. We're a municipal library, so we are a town department. And over at Town Hall, a municipal employee decided to hop on Facebook, which at that point was no longer exclusive to colleges and universities, but was public, and air their grievances about management. Management was not impressed and said, "You can't do that, take it down." And the employee replied with, and I'm paraphrasing here, "Make me." And our municipal lawyer then said, "Well, actually, you don't have a policy about this." And so management came back with a proposed policy, which was intended just to shut it down. No municipal department can be on Facebook. No municipal employees can be on Facebook. And if you are, here's a list of things you can't say or do. That obviously didn't pass, but for me, that was a warning because we at the library had been using social media. We had a history with MySpace. At the time, I was running a teen writing program of a blogger. We were using Facebook to connect with teens and young adults and young families, and seeing how social media could help us deliver library services and make connections in the community. So at that point, realizing I had to work pretty quickly, I started doing research, and I went to, I think it was Massachusetts at the time, or Connecticut, one of them had a huge clearinghouse of library policies, so I could go search through those. And my Google flu was pretty strong back in 2011 as well. So I went online and I sort of pulled some of the most comprehensive, most forward-thinking policies, and I contacted those libraries and talked to them about their policies and learned about why they had included some of the things they had, incidents that had happened. I know it's 2022 and it's shocking to hear this, but people can be awful online. And so I learned from what they had done and crafted what is basically the same policy that we have now. And I'm really excited that we're having this webinar because I do know I need to dust mine off. There are issues that probably should be addressed that weren't really thought about back in 2011, and the language has evolved a lot. But that is why, with people and the internet and your library, you want to have something in place so that when something awful happens on your social media presence and the person responsible says, what are you going to do about it? You've got that policy. And this is what we're going to do. So thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to email or call. But
Thank you, Sam. It's so true that you need to be ahead of it, and that's kind of what the policy is there for, is so that you're kind of ahead of an incident, as you know, and you have something in place so that you know what to do. So thank you for sharing that. Jennifer, do you want to go ahead and share the PowerPoint again?
Yep, I'm going.
Thank you.
This back and forth thing, maybe.
I know.
Okay, I think it's up now.
And then we can go to the next slide, I think.
Next slide. Got it.
So I wanted to circle back to the idea of libraries, social media as designated public forums. So basically, what is a designated public forum? And I'm going to read these definitions because, as I said, I'm not a lawyer and I don't want to misinterpret these definitions for you. So according to the ALA, the Supreme Court of the United States has defined a designated public forum as a forum set aside by the government for expressive activities. And they more further elaborate that the courts closely examine any content-based speech restrictions to determine whether they violate the rights of the speaker. And the ALA recommends to avoid having a library's platform hijacked by content unrelated to the library mission, including commercial or simply irrelevant speech. Libraries should carefully and narrowly craft their public declarations or purpose and acceptable behavior as tied to the mission of the library. So essentially, a social media policy can help you navigate this and ensure that you're not violating anyone's First Amendment rights while still adhering to the library's mission and trying to create that, safe, welcoming space for your patrons. Next slide, please.
Go to the next slide. Here we go. So the ALA social media guidelines outline several different components that you'd want to consider having in your social media policy, some more fleshed out than others. But these are the things you might want to consider hitting on. So we'll be talking about purpose and scope of your social media policy, the audience, who's your social media for, staff responsibilities regarding social media, acceptable behavior sort of by staff, which is in the staff responsibility section, and acceptable behavior by patrons who may be following you or anyone who interacts with your library social media, and consequences for unacceptable behavior. And along those veins, if a patron complains, for example, if a post is removed, a reconsideration policy for posts, and then, you know, in the event that you maybe have to block somebody, getting them reinstated if they agree to shape up, I guess. Having a disclaimer in your policy, sort of the standard, like, anyone who comments, these views are not of the library, these are their own personal views, sort of thing. So I'll talk about that. And then, of course, privacy, which is a huge social media issue and library issue. So we'll be talking about those things. But Karen is going to start us off talking about purpose, scope, and audience, and we'll be pulling some examples from the policies that we mentioned earlier. So just, Karen, just let me know when you want me to go to the next slide.
Sure. So a good social media policy will define the purpose of why the library is using social media in the first place. Why? So your library's mission statement can also help define the purpose of utilizing social media, and many libraries often include this in their purpose. Another component is scope. So in your social media policy, you should identify what you mean by social media and the kind of content you will post on those platforms. And then lastly, identifying your audience can also help you decide what kind of content you will post on the platforms you'll use. So basically, these three things are really interrelated. So for example, you may have stated that your purpose for using social media is to communicate about library events to your patrons. But then when you start thinking about the scope of your social media, you realize you'd also like to post other information that's relevant and useful to your community, you know, like blood drives or school plays or whatever it is. So you end up changing and refining them as you're developing this. So these three components are closely connected. So on this slide, we have examples from Rockingham Free Public Library and the Vermont Library Association that outline their purpose for using social media. And Rockingham's is really nice because it does pull in their mission. So in keeping with the Rockingham Free Public Library's mission to serve the community as an educational, recreational, and cultural center for all ages, the library participates in various internet social software applications. And so that's like a really nice way of pulling in your mission statement and showing how using social media really supports the library's mission. And VLA's example, which is the second example there, they don't explicitly state their mission and their purpose for using social media, but we've shared their mission statement underneath so that you can see how their purpose is directly aligned with their mission statement, because I think that they talk about sharing library-related subjects and issues on their social media, and then in their mission statement, you can see where they talk about how they're there to develop, promote, and improve library and information services. So you see how they're related. And on the next slide, we have examples of scope and audience. So the first two are examples that outline what social software is and mention several possible platforms. So you'll see, you know, Facebook, YouTube, Blogger, which and WordPress, but maybe nowadays it'll be TikTok and Snapchat. And so that's kind of like the scope of like what social media is. They talk about VLA says that social software is defined as any web application, site, or account that facilitates the sharing of opinions and information. So kind of defining what social media is. And then the third is VT-lib's policy, where we kind of identify our audience, which in this case involves multiple groups. We have state employees, libraries statewide, and then the general public. And so again, identifying these will really help you, you know, formulate what it is that you're trying to do on social media.
Cool. Thank you so much. So now that we kind of know why we have a policy, what the policy is going to cover, it's important to outline, and this is what ALA says, outline appropriate behavior and responsibilities of the staff who is managing your library's social media. So it's important, and this is something that VT-lib really feel strongly about, is that any sort of communications or social media effort should be in a team. It's really nice to have people who are able to look over your work just review it and see, is this going to fly? Is there something you didn't notice? So having either a social media team or just like somebody else who reviews something is really important. So you don't necessarily have to put all staff responsibilities and schedules into your policy, but as you're thinking about your policy, just keep in mind who's going to do what and what are they expected to do. The person who is running your social media should have a really strong understanding of the mission of the library, why the library is on social media in the first place, and a good understanding of how to use social media in the first place. So in the staff responsibility section of your policy, you don't have to say like so-and-so is going to post this on this day. That's, like a schedule that you would have offline. But you can say things like, these are the type of posts we are going to make on this specific platform. This is how we are going to communicate on social media. So using the general we, saying like we at the library are doing this instead of saying I is really important, because your social media, again, like Karen said at the beginning, is an extension of your library. So you want to make sure that the staff who are at the customer service desk of your library, they're having the same professionalism on social media as they would at the front desk. So using, a broad we, a consistent and professional tone, being copyright compliant on social media is just all these sort of things that you wouldn't necessarily think about, but that could cause issues if they aren't adhered to. And then, of course, library employees are the masters of patron privacy and confidentiality, and that definitely extends to the social media sphere as well. So in our examples, if the slide will move, here we go. So it has really obviously laid out what staff responsibilities are. So this is the first one from VLA. So writers and content contributors, who are the staff in this case, will check facts, cite sources, present balanced views, acknowledge and correct errors, and check spelling and grammar before making a post live. Copyright compliance is required. They're expected to post information which will be of value to library workers and users. And of course, postings will be respectful of VLA members, contractors, volunteers, partners, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those are really explicit responsibilities for staff who are making posts. This one, the role and utility of sites will be evaluated periodically by library staff. I think that was from the Rockingham policy. This is another important responsibility that actually came up for us here at VTLib. We were not using our Twitter very often. It just wasn't a good platform for us. And so we deleted it because in our policy, it says here at the bottom, non-activity, just reflects poorly. So we decided to get rid of it. So, and that kind of covers you. Having something like that in your policy covers you if you decide you don't want to use a platform anymore. But checking if you are actually using a social media platform every once in a while is a staff responsibility. And to finish up here, similar things. This is from our policy. Posts should be conversational and casual in tone. Comments and messages should be responded to within a timely manner. What staff should do in terms of logos on graphics. These are all things you can include in staff responsibilities. So kind of a broad thing, but just think of acceptable behavior, appropriate behavior for staff who are posting. Oh man, these slides, there we go. Okay.
So then on the other side of that is what is acceptable behavior for patrons and what are consequences for non-compliance with your policy. And this is, this is one of the tougher aspects of engaging in social media. And it's the least fun part because I don't think that any of us really, want to be policing our social media and kind of telling people what they are and are not allowed to do, but it is an important aspect of it. So what types of posts or comments are allowed by your users and which aren't? So it's a little bit easier when the post or comment is not protected by the First Amendment. So does the post contain copyright infringement, libel, threats, obscenity, child pornography? Removing any of that is probably not in violation of the First Amendment. There are, however, more nuanced considerations, which are outlined here if off-topic comments, comments containing confidential information, spam or commercial posts, or comments supporting a political candidate that you should also be considering when you're crafting this portion of your policy. Another consideration is what the platform's policies are. So users can report each other, and the platform like Facebook or Twitter may decide to remove a comment if they decide that it violates their policies. However, libraries cannot use the platform's policies to restrict speech because this could be considered a violation of the First Amendment. So it's one of those, it's a weird thing. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's not something that has been definitively decided by the courts at this point, but operating as a designated public forum, you can't necessarily restrict speech the way that Twitter can restrict speech. And this has come up more and more for not only for libraries, but just in general, as we all know on social media, what is acceptable, Twitter and Facebook and YouTube are still deciding what's acceptable behavior on their sites. So again, just be really careful around that. And then once you've decided what acceptable behavior is on your social media, what will your procedure be for handling a post or comment that violates your policy? Do you delete the post? If you do you document it first? Do you contact the violator and let them know? And are there other consequences for the user in question? Like, do you ban them or block them for a period of time? So I would argue that all of this information should be available in your social media policy so that patrons are clearly aware of what the consequences are and don't feel like you're targeting them or that you're being unfair. And this portion of your social media policy in particular should be written with the advice of legal counsel. So the ALA warns that removing posts on the basis of being controversial or offensive could be in violation of a person's First Amendment rights. And likewise, banning someone indefinitely from posting on your social media could also be considered a violation of the First Amendment. So I would, as Jennifer mentioned, read those ALA guidelines over a few times and then get in touch with legal counsel when you're writing this policy, just to make sure that you are protecting yourselves when you're crafting this policy. And then the other thing with reconsideration, is there a procedure in place for a user to appeal the removal of either their post or subsequent consequences like a ban or a blocking for a period of time? So that's something to consider as well. And then this slide has a couple of examples of policies outlining the kinds of posts or comments that may be removed from social media. And you can see that they're very similar. And actually, a lot of what's mentioned in both of these policies is stuff that's not necessarily protected under the First Amendment. So personal attacks, insults, or threatening language, libelous comments, there's obscenity, so it's one of those things. And I think that if you look across libraries who do have social media policies, all of them have really very similar language around what comments and posts are not acceptable.
Awesome. Yeah, and you'll find similar language in the ALA guidelines as well. As you look, again, from policy to policy, it's all common sense sort of stuff. But if you don't have it explicitly written out, You know, people want to get away with things sometimes. Hopefully you don't have any trolls or anything like that, but people want to get away with stuff. And they'll try and use loopholes, and the policy is really to prevent that from happening.
And I will also say that just as another kind of way to think of it is that if it's not acceptable behavior inside the library, it's probably not acceptable on social media either. And so that's another way to kind of think about it, is like, if you wouldn't let someone do this in person, then they probably shouldn't be able to do it on social media.
Yes. One thing that we wanted to touch on in terms of comments that are left is that sometimes your library may get negative comments on social media that don't violate any of the previous things before. It's a constructive criticism. You know, I would say a non-constructive criticism would be, your library sucks. That's an opinion that you probably can't take down if it's, unless the language is really, you know, profane, but not necessarily something your library has to respond to. That's not a constructive, you know, comment. Sometimes though, you will get constructive negative comments on your social media that your staff should respond to and give feedback to. And I have an example from we did a book giveaway in Barrie, and we had a bunch of free books that we got from a nonprofit, and we wanted to distribute them. And this person commented on our social media on a post about the giveaway, saying basically, well, you can read the post, they didn't really like the books that we had out. They didn't like the books that we had out, but they started off with thank you, and they ended with thank you. So it was respectfully well-written constructive criticism. And so this is something that you definitely want to respond to. So we thanked them for their feedback, we apologized, and then thanked them again for just engaging with us at all. And this user liked the response. They felt like we saw their comment, and, you know, their concerns had been heard, and then, you know, we take it into consideration in a future book giveaway. You know, in this case, we couldn't choose the books that we had. We just happened to have them, and we wanted to distribute them. And most people were really grateful and liked the books that they were able to get, but this person didn't. But just some negative comments you don't need to respond to, but some you should definitely respond to. This is a great, you know, way to open up discussion. And then I had just included this second little paragraph here at the bottom. So as a state of Vermont agency, the Department of Libraries is required to put this little disclaimer, I guess you could kind of call it, on all of our social media things. So if your library, if it's a municipal library or something like that, may have to do something like that. And it has acceptable behavior and consequences right in it. So we can also rely on this part from the state of Vermont if we have to, you know, deal with any comments. All right, so before we get into accessibility, we're just going to finish off this policy segment of the workshop talking about patron privacy and a disclaimer in your policy. So I'll start with the disclaimer. I took this right out of the ALA thing because I think the language is awesome just right as it is. You should have in your policy that comments expressed on any library social medias do not reflect the views or positions of the library, its officers, and employees. That just covers you just in case somebody puts you know, something maybe not particularly complimentary about your library, but it doesn't violate any guidelines. You will know that, you know, people will know that that's just that person's opinion, and doesn't reflect the library's opinion. And then privacy considerations. This is really common sense sort of stuff, but patron information should definitely not be shared on or gathered from social media. Staff information, if you have, explicit permission from staff to post their name, title, and, a photo, if it's like a party or something, then that's fine. But you want to make sure that everyone's on the same page in that sense. And speaking of photos, photos of patrons should not be shared without explicit consent. And you can put in your policy whether verbal consent is sufficient or if you need something like a photo release. And this is especially important when you're dealing with kids. You will absolutely need a parent guardian verbal consent or a photo release form. And if it's a child's face, I would say that a photo release is pretty, a really good thing to have. And I would err on the side of having something like that. If it's somebody like a trustee who you're in contact with all the time, you have a good relationship with them, maybe verbal consent is fine, but it's great to have a photo release form as a backup. And then if somebody leaves a comment on your social media, that's all public. Anyone can go on and see. But before reproducing it, just ask their permission. If they're like, no, I love the library, I love this program, ask their permission before reproducing it. And, be careful about using names or locations or anything like that. And Karen's going to tell one last story about why it's important to have a policy in place in terms of privacy and photos that I'll let her share now.
So in a previous library that I was working at, we did not have a written social media policy in place. However, we were using social media on a regular basis, and there were several of us who were posting. So we would take turns, and someone had posted a picture that they had taken in the stacks, and it was just, it was an innocent picture of the library, just, the books and some tables and patrons at the tables. But what they didn't realize was that when they took the picture, they had taken it standing behind someone who was on their laptop. And the laptop screen ended up showing up in the picture. And unfortunately, what the patron was doing on that laptop was not they were writing essentially they were writing an erotic novel. And so what was visible on the screen of the laptop was not appropriate for a library to be posting on social media. And so the library staff person had posted the picture, and then there has started to be comments from other patrons that were like, yikes, I can't believe you posted this, or oh, this is scary, like, you guys should take this off. But we didn't have a social media policy. So it was a Saturday. Our library administration didn't work on the weekends, and we didn't know what to do because we also knew that we couldn't just decide to take off a post that had comments on it that might be considered a breach of the First Amendment. And so it took a while because we had to, figure out how to contact library administration. I was calling my branch manager's personal cell phone, and she was calling administration, and they called me back. And so it was this whole thing, and but it was up for hours. And so by the time, we got the go ahead to take it down, it had already been out, and several patrons had seen it and shared it, and it was a mess. So it's just another, and it violates, it was a violation of the patron's privacy for the person who was on the laptop, and then it violated what we ended up having as a social media policy, which is no obscenity on the platform. So it's just another example of why social media policies are so important, and why it's important for staff to know what their expectations are, what they are and are not allowed to do on social media. So yeah, fun story.
Yeah, a fun story and a really illustrative story about the importance of having a social media policy and really being thoughtful about what you post. before you put it out there. And if you have the luxury of having a colleague who can look at your posts beforehand, that's a really good reason why. You know, if somebody else had maybe seen that and been like, oh, ugh, maybe not. But I realize some of you are solo librarians and you kind of have to use your judgment. Having a policy in place will really protect you. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, definitely stick them in the chat. We're going to move on to the accessibility portion of this social media roundup. This could be a whole workshop in itself, but we're just going to touch on some basic points. We're going to, in our follow-up email, we'll send out a document that has links on how to make things more accessible on each platform. I think, Karen, you had Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter mostly, those big three guys. But so we'll send that out after, and there are some additional resources in the PowerPoint. So Karen is going to touch on some of these for us.
And I am hopeful that there will be future continuing education opportunities that do focus just on this, but this is kind of just a brief overview of some accessibility tips for social media. And right now I'm not really doing a how-to. This is more a reminder of being more aware of accessibility issues with social media. And as Jennifer said, we'll provide resources after with more detail on how to do some of this. So the first thing is to make text accessible. So writing in plain language. The standard is to write in language that an 8th grader would understand. And this is a practice that helps everyone. So keeping your text simple is easier for everyone in your audience. It's a practice of universal design, which is that the more people you accommodate by making something accessible, the easier it is for everyone to access. And some tips to keep in mind when you're thinking of accessible text. Consider how easily your text can be read by people with cognitive disabilities, English language learners, or how it will be read by a screen reader. Avoid long sentences, jargon, and make sure to spell out acronyms the first time you use them because not everyone knows what they stand for. Another accessibility element I wanted to talk about a little bit are emojis. So emojis are super fun to use and they can convey a lot in just one little picture, but they do pose accessibility issues for some people. So if they're used a bunch and are spread throughout the text, it can be difficult for people with reading disabilities to follow along just because they kind of distract from the text itself. And then the other thing is that screen readers read emojis out loud. So if you create a post with 5 screaming emojis, the screen reader will literally read screaming, 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 which can become very tiresome for people. So best practice is to use them sparingly and at the end of your text so that it's not distracting from what you're actually trying to say. And then for hashtags, write your hashtags in camel case. And what this means is capitalizing the first letter of every word in your hashtag. The bullet point on the slide illustrates that. So it allows people with reading disabilities to read the hashtag more easily because it shows you where each word starts. And it's also helpful for screen readers because it lets the screen reader know where each word starts and can prevent weird mispronunciations where the screen reader is trying to read it all as one word versus recognizing that they're separate words. For alt text and image descriptions, alternative text, which is also known as alt text, provides a description of an image to allow people who cannot see the image to know what it is. When a screen reader comes to an image on a web page, it will read the alt text. If the image doesn't have alt text, the screen reader will usually read the file name of the image. So it'll read something like img28734.jpg. which doesn't help a user understand what the image actually is. So several social media platforms will automatically add alternative text to images that are uploaded. For example, if you post a picture on Facebook, it will automatically generate an alternative text like, quote, maybe an image of a mountain, tree, or nature. And so it's a little bit more helpful than the file name, but it still doesn't let someone with a screen reader know what the actual image is. So many social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, definitely. I think also Twitter offers a way for you to manually add alternative text when you're adding a post. And we'll share links about how to do that. But if for some reason you're unable to add alternative text, add a descriptive caption. So some folks do both. They'll add the alt text and then also do a descriptive caption. That way, you're just ensuring that people have access to that image, either through the alt text or your descriptive caption. And then as for posting videos, adding captions to videos makes them accessible, obviously, for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, but they also help people who are watching a video in a non-native language, or people who are in sound-off environments. So there's a significant increase in views also. When a video has captioning, more people are willing to watch the video. And just speaking from personal experience, if I'm lying in bed scrolling on social media, I'm more likely to stop and watch a video if it has captioning because my sound is off, or if I'm at work, on my break, if the video has captioning, I'll watch it, but I wouldn't watch it otherwise because I don't want to disturb the people around me. And then on top of that, people are more likely to remember the information in the video if they can see and hear the information. So it's an added incentive to make sure that your videos have captions. And then lastly, I know that a big issue around accessibility is the concern that you're not doing it right. And I just want to say that for everyone, it's a process, it's a journey, and it takes practice. So you're not going to get it right all of the time. And you're going to make mistakes when you're trying to be more accessible on your social media. But doing your best to make your social media more accessible is always a good thing. And I would recommend following social media accounts for organizations that you think are doing a good job and trying to model them, listening to feedback from your patrons, and not being afraid to ask questions if you run across something that you're not sure about.
Yeah, all such good advice. Even even when I'm posting in our social media and I'm very aware of all these accessible guidelines and best practices, don't always remember to do it, or I'm not sure how to do it in the moment. I always make sure that whatever is in the image I'm posting, if there's text, that I'm writing that out in the caption. That's one thing that's super easy to do automatically if you can't do anything else. I'm gonna mute this person. Okay. So we will be sending out more information about accessibility. The final portion of this webinar is just going to be showing you some cool new things on Facebook that you might not be aware of. I'll put a disclaimer that this is for people who have been using Facebook for a while and have been using a page for their library for a while. If you are brand new to Facebook, this might be a little bit too much. But if you are interested in starting a Facebook page for your library, please get in contact with me. I would be happy to help you do that. But recently, Facebook has made some changes. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. I'm going to share it now. And I wanted to talk about those with you. So I have access to change the Department of Library's Facebook page. And one new thing that you might not have seen yet is that if you go up to this little arrow in the right-hand corner of your personal Facebook, if you have access to your library's page, it will show up here as a profile. So if I want to go post something on the Department of Libraries page, I would just go up to this corner, switch profile, and then I could choose it here. I can also go to my dashboard and go here to Meta Business Suite, and that will also take me to where I want to go on my Facebook page. So I'm going to stay here for 1 second and talk to you about some of these things here in the business suite. So this is your home page, what kind of consolidates all of these different things here into one, just to give you a brief overview. You have a to-do list here. You can have goals if you're looking to expand your reach. You have some statistics here about the people, about how people are using your social media platforms. I should say we only show Facebook and Instagram here It's really easy to manage both of those in the business suites because Facebook and Instagram are now under Meta. And I definitely read some articles about that whole thing. Facebook just is doing the most every day. But Facebook and Instagram are really easy to manage on this in this platform because they are like allied platforms now, I guess. So you'll be able to see the recent posts that you've made and different, the statistics for who has been looking at them, any recent stories that you've put up, your planner, which is what I'm going to focus on here in a second, and then any ads, and then posts from similar places. So like we got the Aldrich here, some of their recent posts, Judavine, Barnett. So we follow a bunch of Vermont libraries on social media, so they would pop up. And then if we go back over here, you'll have notifications. So this will show any recent comments or messages that you've gotten, your inbox. You'll see, comments, Instagram comments, any messages you've gotten on Messenger or any DMs that you've gotten. Recent posts and stories that you've put up, they'll all show up here again, along with some statistics. Planner, which we're going to talk about in a second. Your ads, we're not going to talk about ads today. That's a whole other bucket of worms. And then your insight page, which has more in-depth statistics. But I really want to talk today about the planner. So some of you may be familiar with social media tools like Hootsuite, which allow you to post to different platforms at once and allow you to schedule different posts. And you can use those for free, but to get the most out of, tools like that, you really need to pay. However, Planner, this new feature on Facebook, basically allows you to do Hootsuite or those type of things right in Facebook for free. And when I saw that this capability was available, I couldn't believe it, and I have been using it literally all the time. So that's what I want to talk about today. We're going to schedule a post together here really quickly, and I know we're running out of time, so we'll kind of go through it fast, but I just want to make you aware of it so that you can go back and sort of play with it on your own. So I'm in the planner view right now. I see my entire week here. So I can see all of the things that I've posted on Facebook and Instagram, whether it's a regular post or in a story. So I can go click on every day right here. It has a certain, I don't know if National Pizza Day is a major holiday, but it has noteworthy holidays here right under the day, and then also coming up on the side. And the really cool thing is that if it's, something like this that Facebook is aware of, you can schedule something for this particular holiday right here on the side, a post or a story, and they'll even have some templates for you as well. So if you look at the month view up here, you can see lots of different stuff coming up. And you can click on that and be able to schedule a post like you would any other time. So it's a really good way. I recommend planning out posts, especially if you don't work on the weekends. You can, during the week while you're in your working hours, you can plan posts for the weekend, and you'll be able to keep up your engagement on social media without having to go outside of work hours and do that. It helps you think about what events your library has coming up and making sure that you advertise them and raise awareness around them so you actually get people to attend. So highly recommend using this planner feature. You don't have to go super far in advance. I usually only do a few days at a time, but this is a pretty big part of my job at this point, so I have the time to do that. You may not have the time to do this and may just want to go onto your page and post something, but if you have the time, I recommend looking at this. So I'm going to go back to this week view up here. And I want to, ooh, this guy did not catch up with my, here we go. So I wanted to go back to this week view here. I wanted to show you how you can schedule a post on Facebook and Instagram if it's connected, if you have an Instagram, right from this planner feature in Facebook. So I wanted to schedule something for Monday, which is Valentine's Day, but it is also our new state librarian, Catherine Denelneo's first day. So I wanted to acknowledge that and have it come up first thing in the morning so we could have, you know, well wishes and nice comments coming in for Catherine throughout the day. So I am going to schedule a post on Facebook and Instagram. So all I would do is go to the day I want, click schedule post, and choose the time that I want. So I want it to be pretty early in the morning that day. So I'm going to say 8 a.m. because that's when we open. I'm going to save that. And I want to post on both platforms. So Facebook's already checked off. I'm going to click on Instagram as well. And then you could see, you'll be able to see a preview here when we upload everything. And you can just, if I just want to post to Instagram, I can uncheck Facebook too. So it's a really useful feature. So I'm going to go ahead and add my photo that I want to schedule here. I already have it ready. So I can upload a photo, and it's going to show you how it's going to look on Instagram and then Facebook here. And of course, we're going to add a caption. And I have one written out here that I'm going to copy quickly. I'm going to go back here and then just paste it in. You can also just write directly into the text box. And then it will reload itself and you'll be able to see a preview. This and then on Instagram. Now it can be a little squirrely adding alt text in this sort of planner thing. So I went ahead and added an image description, which is something that Karen talked about in her accessibility feature. So I just described everything that's going on in this graphic. But even if I didn't have this image description, the caption, you know, basically explains what's going on. There's no important information in this image that they couldn't get from my caption. And I always do this when I'm making posts. So I check, I'm like, okay, that's how I want it to look on both platforms. I double check that it's on the right day at the right time, and then I schedule my post. And then you will see that it comes up here on your planner so that you'll know you've successfully scheduled it and that it's coming up. The other cool thing about Planner is that we'll tell you when your followers on both your platforms are the most active. I don't always pay attention to that, you know, for various reasons, but it could be interesting for you to look at to see when your users are going to be seeing your posts. So that is Planner. Let me show you one more time how to get to that business suite. So if you're on your Pages profile, okay, I'm back on my personal profile right now. So I can go to Meta Business Suite right here, or I can go down with this arrow, go to Switch Profile, and go to the Department of Libraries page. So now I'm on our libraries page dashboard. You can go right up here to Professional Dashboard, and you can see a bunch of other things that you can also see, you know, in the business suite. But if you scroll down, you'll also get Meta Business Suite here, and it will take you to the same place. So there are lots of different ways to access the same information, and you can see your planner here and go to your planner again. So I'm going to stop sharing now. All right, so we're 2 minutes over, not too bad. I want to thank everybody so much for attending today. This was recorded again, so you can go back and look at it to refer to different things. I'll send out a follow-up email with an evaluation for today, as well as some additional documents and links that you may find helpful. Let me see. It doesn't look like we have any. Oh, we do have some comments and stuff in the chat that I think Karen replied to. But if there's anything we need to follow up on, we will definitely do that. And if there are any additional questions, please feel free to email me or Karen. And if we can't answer them, we will find the answer to them. Oh, interesting, Nancy. Okay, let me stop recording here. Nancy, if you want to stay on, I can work with you a little bit on that. But to everyone else, thank you so much for attending. We hope to have another social media roundup like this again. And I hope this was helpful. And have an excellent weekend. Stay safe out there. And we'll see you next week. Another week of librarianing.
Woohoo, thank you.
If I can, here we go, stop recording. Whew.